Ladies and gentlemen, hey, let's talk shop. Let's close up week 8 with Monday Night Football, a game where fantasy-wise it should be pretty interesting, should be pretty fun. There's some inefficiencies in the prop market that we're going to talk about. We're going to smack those inefficiencies out and win some dollar-rooskies. Week 8, another lovely week. Week 7, big week, right? Over $15,000 rooskies in profit this week in week 8. Not as much, but we'll take the near $3,000, about $2,700 in change in profit. It is simple. It continues to be simple this year. You stack Buffalo, you stack the Rams, you stack Tampa Bay, you win dollar rooskies. The Discord was lovely. Everybody's winning. My man Weave ended up winning last night. What is this, like $24,000? My man Crushable's got his first win on Prize Picks. The 5-pick parlay comes through. Obsessed wins $500. My man Vibe said he just signed up on Friday and he won $1,000, so he turns his $25 or whatever sign up into $1,000. Get in on Patreon right now. Over 1,000 Patreon members. Link down below. I don't know what you are waiting for. The tools, everything for tonight, projections, ranks, ownership, all up. We're going to reference it during this show. Hey, let's get into right now the video. There's your subscribe button. We're about to hit 44,000 subscribers. I appreciate you all a ton. Player by player breakdown now. Starting up top, salary order with Mr. Patrick Mahomes. Now, there is some big injury news on the slate. Kadarius Toney and Shepard are both expected to play, so I'm projecting them in, but they're still technically listed as questionable game time decisions, but they've both been expected to play is the news. No Clyde Edwards-Helaire, no Kenny Golladay, no Saquon Barkley. That's kind of news we already know. Jordy Fortstead, a backup tight end who scored a couple touchdowns for the Chiefs this year, is on IR. So Patrick Mahomes is going to find himself in a positive pass protection situation where this Kansas City offensive line is not as good as it was supposed to be coming into the year, where it ranked as maybe a top 2, top 3 offensive line. And now they'll get the Giants 24th ranked just pass rush. So I have Mahomes right now projecting out as the highest projected play in the slate by about 5 points. Look, even though Patrick Mahomes last time out was not good, right? He scores 8 fantasy points, and the recency bias that we all have is going to remember, oh my God, they lost big time to Tennessee in that terrible secondary, only 8 fantasy points, right? But when you look back at it, outside of that week, he scored at least 21 or more fantasy points every single week. And in 5 out of 7 games, he scored at least 25 or more fantasy points. So I'm not going to take that 1 week and just assume that happens. I have Mahomes yet again projected out for 25 plus points. And even though he's $12,000 flat, if you're scoring 24 to 25 plus points on a showdown slate, large majority of the time you're going to be needed in a flex spot. So because of that, I do like Mahomes today. He is a yes. Now, Tyreek Hill he's the biggest boomer bust player this year, right? He's had 3 games of over 22 points, right? 2 of those over 30 points. And then he's had 4 games under 15 points. Now, a couple of those games, he's had like 13, he's had 14 and a half, but then he's also had like 9-point games, right? And like 6-point games in there. So I'm unsure that this secondary of the Giants can actually stop Tyreek Hill, but I've said that about other teams, and then they just go too high and they take away the big plays, and he has to get peppered with targets. But that's been happening. In 4 straight games, he has 9 or more targets. So I think Tyreek Hill, if you're looking for these pay-up options here, right, you got 4 guys above $10,000. A lot of them, if not all of them, are strong plays. I think Tyreek Hill at $11,000, I'm going to prefer right now than Travis Kelce at $10,600. I currently have Travis Kelce projecting out for about 3 less points than Tyreek Hill. I have Tyreek Hill ceiling massively higher. You have Travis Kelce, who has not topped 18 fantasy points since week 2, but during that time, he's had 3 out of his 5 games getting like 17 and a half points, and he continues to run the most routes out of any tight end at 35 per game, 9.3 targets per game. Look, this is just a fine spot for Kelce. Early on in the year, we were hammering the under 7.5 receptions per game because that's a lot just for a tight end and a player in general, and he kept coming through at 6 and 7 receptions, and we just barely kept getting there. Now the prop market has dropped to like 6.5 in a lot of spots, so we can't take that. But at 10,600, it's nothing really wrong with Kelce. It's just the fact that Tyreek Hill, Mahomes all project out better, and so does Daniel Jones. I have Daniel Jones for more fantasy points than Travis Kelce. I think that Daniel Jones makes for a very strong play on this slate when you look at everything that he's been doing. He's coming off of definitely his worst game of his year, but you're getting his terrible offensive line, which ranks 30th according to Pro Football Focus, 27th according to Player Profiler, right, in protection rate, and now they're facing the dead last pass rush in the Kansas City Chiefs, right? So he's still going to have a negative pass blocking advantage. That's how bad his offensive line is, but it's not going to be as bad. It's going to be pretty close to neutral. He's throwing the ball 35 times per game, 247 yards per game, over 25 rushing yards so far in 5 out of 7 games. So he gives you that added element on the ground. And Daniel Jones, just for me right now, is going to be a situation that I really like more so. I like him on DraftKings a lot. Don't get me wrong at this price point, especially if you're not playing a Mahomes. You can start off with a Tyreek and a Daniel Jones in your lineup somehow. I think that's a solid start. Also, the opposite is solid if you just want to go Mahomes, Tyreek. But Daniel Jones looks really good in the prop markets in a lot of different areas. So far I've taken 3 different props today. These are 2 of them, right? So these are 2 of the props. We absolutely smashed the whole fucking place out on Prize Picks in the prop department. If you factor in what we ended up doing from a prop standpoint in terms of myself and the Discord popping off, if I include the Prize Picks profits into the DFS profits from yesterday. I think it was like $2,500 in profit just in props alone yesterday. $2,500. That's like a month's fucking salary in one afternoon. Yeah. Thank you to Prize Picks. Thank you to Underdog Fantasy for having the opportunity to play in the great state of Texas, where it's a little bit more difficult to get in some legal bets, right? I mean, talk to some people up north to get some things done. It's not as efficient. So you get the over. Daniel Jones, 20.5 completions. This is a massive discrepancy. This number on Underdog is like 23.5. I have Daniel Jones projected for around 23.4, 23.2. So we take the over 20.5 there. We love that. And Patrick Mahomes, every single week, this guy's smashing his over rushing yard number, and it's still not high enough. Why is he smashing it? Because more teams are playing two high safeties. When teams play two high safeties, they have one less guy in the box. So it invites the run more. When you don't call a run play on those plays because the Chiefs never fucking run the ball, and you decide to pass, nothing opens up downfield. Patrick Mahomes is forced to scramble more. This is going to be a fantastic spot. I have Patrick Mahomes projecting out for 32 rushing yards, and his prop is at 18.5 right now. His prop on Underdog is in the 20s. So go ahead and smash. I don't like taking a ton of overs, especially on these showdown slates, but right now these are inefficient props. There's not a lot of good spots to snag unders. We're still waiting for some more props to come out. But Patrick Mahomes right now, you look at the 18.5 rushing yards. These are his last 5 games. 35, 31, 61, 26, and 45 rushing yards. He has cleared this 18.5 number in 6 out of 7 games so far this season. This is the best prop on the board right now, the Patrick Mahomes over 18.5 rushing yards, and then we'll pair it up with Daniel Jones over 20.5 completions, assume he plays from behind or just a couple quick passes. They don't get much going, so I like that a lot. So here's the thing. Use the code SAL. That site you just saw is prizepicks.com. You get a $100 bet for free, up to $100 if you use the code SAL right there. Free. Simple. Free. That is one of the best props I've seen all season long. Mahomes last week was at like 13.5, then 15.5, right? The last 2 weeks, and he keeps smashing it with 31 and 35 rushing yards. And it's not like he's doing it on one attempt. This guy's running the ball 3, 4, 5, 6 times a game. So go in there, get it right now. PrizePicks.com. Use the code SAL, S-A-L. Free bet, free. Up to $100. What are you waiting for? Go take advantage of it as we slide on a late night right back into the player-by-player breakdown. You get to Daryl Williams. Daryl Williams is an interesting player here because last week they get blown out, so it's hard to judge his usage then outside of the snaps that he was seeing, the routes that he was running, which were both very good. Daryl Williams this week I am projecting out as a solid play. Based on his price point, I actually have him that he's underpriced. $9,000 is sticker shock for a guy like Daryl Williams, but I actually have him underpriced. I think it's a fair price point versus number 16 run defense right now of the Giants. So far through his 2 weeks, he's only combined for 26 attempts, but he had 25 of those 2 weeks ago. Last week he was only able to run 5 times because they got down so big, but he's averaging 25 routes per game, and he's seen so far a decent amount of targets, 8 in those 2 games, leading to 24 and 8 points. So I have him projected for like 16.2. That might be a little bit high, but either way, I think $9,000 is a fair price point. As of right now, I'm not going to be gushing over him. He's the only guy in the $9,000 range, but I'll be interested in seeing what the leverage here is later in the day. You know, the name Daryl Williams, not that exciting, didn't do much last week. Maybe people don't go to him as much. I think you might find a nice leverage play in Daryl Williams. Now you get this next player in Devonte Booker, and normally on these showdown slates, we have these price drop-offs. Look, you have these 4 guys above $10,000, then only 1 guy in the $9,000 range at $9,000 flat, and then only 1 guy in the $8,000 range at $8,200, and then only 1 guy in the $7K range in Sterling Shepard at $7K flat. So you go from $10,000 to the $6K range with only 3 options in between there. Normally that means that one of these guys is going to pick up a lot of ownership because they're just the decided mid-range value. My guess is that it's Sterling Shepard if he is active as he's expected to be. But first, Devonte Booker, though, quietly in 3 games without Saquon, is averaging 17 touches per game, right, so far between the receiving and the passing. 11 targets in those 3 games, and he's had 21, 11, and 15 fantasy points. Very quietly, he's just scoring like 17 fantasy points a game. 70+% snaps in each of those games. He's had 1 game with 70, 1 game with 80, and 1 game with 90% of the snaps. So they're not giving the ball to anybody else back there. They're giving it to converted fullback to running back Elijah Penny a couple times a game, but nothing crazy. And now he gets to number 32 run defense. So they rank 17 in tackling Kansas City. I think Devonte Booker looks like a solid play as well. So both these running backs, both solid plays. I think they're both fair price points. I want to see what the ownership is later in the day. We'll talk about that. I'll be live at 6 p.m. Eastern time today. So be sure to tune in for that. Bring your questions. We'll talk about the best leverage plays. That's normally where we can find the absolute best plays on the slate. If you're a Patreon member and you can't make the video, become a Patreon member and you can just see the leverage opportunities based on the ownership, things like that. So those running backs, one of them will probably open up as a really good value leverage play today. I'll be interested in seeing who that is. I expect these next players right here, these receivers from the Giants, to just be very owned, and they should. I mean, Sterling Shepard so far is expected to play. He's played 3 full games. 1 he left with injury, so 3 full games, 9 targets, 10 targets, and 13 targets in those 3 games, yielding 24, 18, and 18 fantasy points. He leads this team with a 24% target share, 33% of the red zone share. Should be a fine matchup here, especially if you expect them, like Vegas does, as 9.5-point underdogs to play from behind. I'd expect Shepard, if he's active, to see somewhere around those 10 targets. I'd also expect Shepard to play in the slot, because we saw this in the week that Kadarius Toney only ran 5 routes and he saw 3 targets on those 5 routes. Shepard was in that game in the slot. That was a game where he saw 14 targets, and he was in the slot for that first drive. I think Shepard plays in the slot. Kadarius Toney is on the outside with Darius Slayton on the other outside, and Shepard, that's where he thrives, in the slot. So I like Shepard a good amount. I've been projecting it as a nice play, and so is Kadarius Toney. So you get Kadarius Toney here. All these Giants receivers are in the same price range. Kadarius Toney is a surefire yes for me because he's way too cheap. At $6,800, this is a man who in 2 full games has 22 targets. He brought in 16 catches for 267 yards as a rookie in 2 games. And then in his 3rd full game starting in week 6, he saw 3 targets on just 5 routes run on the first drive before getting that ankle re-injured. So this is Kadarius Toney that, if he is indeed out there, looks good. Now, if Kadarius Toney and Shepard were to miss, we'll talk about some guys who benefit from that. But Kadarius Toney right now, for me, I currently have Toney and Shepard projecting out for like around 13 points, meaning that they should both be around 8 to somewhere in the 8K range, like $8,500 players. I think they both look nice. Darius Slayton, last week he was operating as the wide receiver 1 because there was no Toney and there was no Slayton. And he operated as the wide receiver 1 and he played well. He saw 9 targets, caught 5 balls for 63 yards. He now has 10 or more fantasy points in 3 out of 4 games very quietly this year. And in 2 of those games, Sterling Shepard was active. Now, one of them, Kadarius Toney, wasn't active and Kenny Golladay wasn't doing much. But if these 2 receivers are indeed back today, expect Slayton to be the wide receiver 3. And if that's the case, he is definitely going to be probably not significantly, but decently overpriced. Like, he doesn't even project out for 10 points for me if these 2 guys return. If they both are out again, then he's going to be a yes. Evan Ingram, it's tough. It's a tough sell on Evan Ingram here. He is going to be somebody that remains, I would say, barely in play for me. This is a guy that I'm tempted to take his prop unders on, depending if you could find him at like the high or mid 30s in receiving yards. He'll stay in play. He saw a season high 8 targets last week, yes, but I mean, it didn't even net to anything. He's not getting targets downfield. 8 targets last week without Shepard and Toney. Those are going to drop when they return today, and it resulted in 6 catches for 44 yards, just 10.4 fantasy points, which were all season highs this week. He only has 1 target of 20 plus yards down the field. He's an undersized tight end who really can't block. And when he goes out, he's going out on these play action delayed passes. He's not getting much downfield. So it's hard to really like Evan Ingram when these guys are coming back now. His price point is up. Like, if he was in the 4K range or even the 3K range, then he's a really good play. But at $5,400, we know he's not getting downfield usage. It's kind of touchdown or bust at this point. Dante Pettis will be an if-then scenario for you. If these other 2 receivers return, Dante Pettis is the wide receiver 4. Now, he's been playing very well with the opportunities he's getting. Last week, operating as the wide receiver 2, right? In the last 2 weeks without Kadarius Toney, in one of those games Shepard did play, he's seen a 20% target share, right? He's seen 16 targets on the year, 10 catches in those 2 games. But if these 2 guys return, Pettis just quickly becomes a wide receiver 4. He quickly only starts to run, even if they play a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, he probably runs 10, 12 routes, sees 0 to 2 targets, and at $5,000 is a clear no. So he's a no for me today. He becomes a yes because he projects out for less than 3 points. He becomes a yes if a Toney and or a Shepard were to miss. Mecole Hardman is a very encouraging price point here, especially for the usage you're seeing the last 3 games. I mean, Mecole Hardman has operated as the wide receiver 2 all year long, running 30 routes a game, playing 67% of the snaps. And now, if you look at what he's doing, right, he's averaging 5.7 targets per game. But look at the last 3 games. In games where the Chiefs have been trailing big like that last week, sure. In a couple of games that were a little closer where they won, like Washington. But in his last 3 games, he's running 35 or more routes in each of those 3 games. He's had 17 catches for 166 yards. Now, that's not great. 166 yards on 17 catches for a guy who's supposed to be the speed demon down the field, that's not good. But if you're just talking about fantasy points and PPR formats, I mean, you're getting right there 11, 12 fantasy points per game without even any big plays or touchdown upside to it. 22 targets in the last 3 games, 7.3 per game. We like to start to see these numbers, and now he gets this matchup you're going to find against this New York Giants secondary. So I do like Mecole Hardman here at $4,800. Every single time on Showdown slates, he's kind of this boomer bust player, and he just is fine. Like, his floor is like 8 to 9 fantasy points if he can just catch a couple balls. He usually has 1 deep one or intermediate pass in him. The next one's up are the kickers. I like Harrison Buckner more than Graham Gano. That should be obvious because his team's projected for 9 more points and much more red zone visits. So if you're choosing one, I would choose Buckner. Graham Gano, $200 less. I mean, it's fine. You'll get different by playing Graham Gano, but not by much. So that's going to be where that lands. And then you get the defenses on here. Normally, I'll just say both defenses are in play. I guess in GPPs, both are in play, especially for how often the Chiefs are turning over the ball. But if I had to choose one, I would actually choose the Chiefs. Again, they're 9-point favorites. They get Daniel Jones, who's been a turnover machine in his career. And I would actually say no to the Giants defense. I get it, though. The Chiefs are turning the ball over left and right. If you think that continues after their bye and after their a little bit of an extended break off with the Monday Night Football game now, and also also returning to home as 9-point favorites, well then yes, you can go right to there, but I'm not going to. So now we get to the value, right? If you're not talking about kickers, if you're not talking about defenses, it's like below 5K, you get McCole Hardman, and then you just automatically down to this 2K range where Byron Pringle resides. And Byron Pringle is clearly the wide receiver 4 in this Chiefs team. Like, he has not yet passed DeMarcus Robinson because the snaps are nowhere near that. Byron Pringle has only played 31% of the snaps, DeMarcus Robinson 70% of the snaps. Pringle running only 14 routes a week, Robinson 31.5. But there's some merit to be saying that Pringle is actually way better than that. Now, we saw season high 45% of the snaps last week. That's a little skewed because they played more 4 wide receiver sets as they were trailing a lot, but it resulted in 5 catches, 73 yards, and 6 targets. Maybe this gets him some more playing time. He's had 7 or more fantasy points in 3 straight games now. And when you talk about his price point of $2,200, if he's scoring 7 fantasy points there, that is a smash play for you, right? He projects out nicely for me today. I do like Byron Pringle. He's averaging over 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He becomes a yes at this price range for me because I do think that on a Chiefs offense, if you're running 15 routes and going to see 3 or 4 targets, you're definitely in play. Next up is Kyle Rudolph, the tight end 2 on his team. With all these playmakers returning, it's hard to really like him. He's only had 5 targets since Evan Ingram returned, and during that time, there's been really no Kadarius Toney. There's been a banged up 2 and out Sterling Shepard. So you're getting a touchdown or bust player here. He only has so far 4 catches for 30 yards since Ingram has returned these last couple of weeks. It's going to get worse if these other guys return. Projects out for me for like 2 points. If you want to play him as a touchdown or bust on a showdown slate, it can definitely happen. He can definitely have 2 catches, 12 yards, and a touchdown. I'm just going to put him as a no to make things simpler. John Ross will operate as the wide receiver 5 today if Toney and Shepard are back. If they're not, he'll operate as the wide receiver 4. And he really hasn't produced, right? He's only seen 2 catches on for 27 yards on 4 targets the last 2 weeks with no Shepard or Toney. Like a month ago, he scored a touchdown in the end zone, sure. But actually, he had back-to-back weeks of touchdowns. But these last couple of weeks, he's fallen off a little as Darius Slayton has returned, as Dante Pettis has taken on a bigger role and been active, and now these other players are going to return. So John Ross, for me, only going to be in play if both Shepard and Toney are ruled out today, which you can see on the live stream. I'm not expecting that, so he's a no. Now you actually get some players to pop up next. McKinnon's usage is not that encouraging, though. So far, 2 games without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like 2 full games. He's only ran 3 times on the ground, right? And none last week in the blowout, but 3 times 2 weeks ago. And he's seen 8 targets, but so has Daryl Williams. Like, Williams has seen 8 targets too, and Williams has ran more routes, 25 routes per game to McKinnon's 15. So he's just a clear backup running back here. And I don't know if we're just skewed because of preseason performances and a couple of nice games with a really good run scheme in San Francisco and think McKinnon's better than he is. He's obviously aged with a lot of injuries to his lower body and those knees, but so far through 2 weeks, you're getting 2.5 fantasy points and 3.7 fantasy points. I'll keep him in play at $1,000 because he's running 15 routes, and that could lead to 3 catches for 40 yards for a running back, right? But at $1,000, he projects out for me for, I think, 4 fantasy points flat. It's an okay play in a showdown slate, especially when you factor in the talent. I would prefer, though, for $200 less. DeMarcus Robinson is down here at $800. And look, DeMarcus Robinson is like the clear and obvious. They like that he can run block. They like that he runs his routes and all this stuff. He's never like getting too much separation, but he's operating as the clear wide receiver 3 on this team. He's averaging 31.5 routes run per game. DeMarcus Robinson is $800 this week, averaging 31.5 routes run per game on a showdown slate with Patrick Mahomes on a team with a 31 implied team total, excuse me, coming off of games of 4 and 6 targets, right? So he hasn't been great this year. He's played in 7 games this year, and only twice has he topped 4 fantasy points. But when he does, 13.6 and 13.6, right? He's had 3 catches. These are the exact performances. Week 2, 3 catches, 46 yards, and a touchdown. Week 6, 3 catches, 46 yards, and a touchdown. So you're either getting that performance or you're getting not great performances of 3.7, 1.8, 1.9, 1.7 points, right? He's going to probably go out there today and see somewhere around 3 to 5 targets. At $800, that has to be in play, especially when you factor in that he has seen red zone usage, 2 red zone throws attempts or targets so far this year, and he has 2 touchdowns. So when I put DeMarcus Robinson as a yes, don't think that means I got to play 100% DeMarcus Robinson. It means if you're floating in this range below $2,000, that's the guy I'm going to. When I put Byron Pringle as a yes, it does not mean I got to get Byron Pringle in my lineup. I'm building out this stud lineup, forcing in Byron Pringle. No, Byron Pringle can score you 0 points. DeMarcus Robinson can score you 0 points today. The point being is if you're looking in that area, I'm going to hopefully try to not dumpster dive today if I can build a lineup that doesn't dumpster dive. Maybe it means a cheaper captain or McCole Hardman. Maybe it just means an expensive captain and a defense or a kicker, whatever it might be. I'm going to try and not dumpster dive. But if I have to, Byron Pringle is a guy who stands out as the best dumpster dive, and DeMarcus Robinson is right next to him. Next up, you get a couple of players to actually close out the slate. We can just talk about the final 4 here. Elijah Penny, again, a former fullback, came into the NFL at 244 pounds, still pretty much that big. He saw 9 opportunities on the ground last week, got like 20 yards. That's a high number. Like, I think he probably touches the ball 4 times today, and if that's the case, he's going to average 2 to 3 yards per clip, even against a bad run defense. even in a good game, even if you see 6 carries for 30 yards today, it's not doing much for you. You're going to need a touchdown or bust there, basically a fullback not interested. Colin Johnson is just a pretty clear no. I don't even think he'll be active today if these other guys return, because they'll operate as the wide receiver 6. I don't think they hold 6 receivers. So, yeah, I don't think Colin Johnson will be active. If those other guys are out, then sure, Colin Johnson should be active as the wide receiver 4 today if there's no Shepard or Tony. But even with those guys out, he's only seen 2 targets last week. So, not that interested in Johnson. Josh Gordon is somebody who on his first Showdown slate, all the donkeys played this guy at like a 20+% clip. We've been telling you he's the wide receiver 5 on this team. I don't care what Josh Gordon did 5 years ago. He has played 10, 12, and 10% of the snaps. He has ran 2, 4, and 4 routes. That is 10 routes on the year, leading to 2 targets so far, leading to 1 catch for 11 yards. Josh Gordon 5 years ago, 6 years ago, really 2014, 2013 was really good. Josh Gordon, almost a decade later at 30+ years old, where he is now behind firmly Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson, and he's been on the team for a month now and still not getting the usage, is not somebody that I would actually have confidence in playing. This is not the same Josh Gordon that your kids knew, that you knew when you were in high school. Noah Gray, the final guy to talk about here. Jody Fortson is on IR. He's a backup tight end. Noah Gray, the rookie, is actually seeing some work since then. In week 6, he had a season-high 7 routes, led to no targets. So that's better than the 0 to 2 routes he was running. And then in week 7, he broke that again with a season-high 10 routes in a game they're trailing, of course, saw 1 target. He has 3 targets through 6 games. I don't want to play him, but I just want to let you know that there's actually some use out of the backup tight end now happening because of the Jody Fortson injury. Shouldn't be crazy use, but Noah Gray was a solid college producer. So there you go. It's an interesting slate because there are some good values. I mean, you got a lot of good values. Jerick McKinnon, the kickers, the defenses, but Jerick McKinnon, you get a DeMarcus Robinson and a Byron Pringle. So there's enough there to really build whatever type of lineup you want. We have this murkiness on these mid-range, really solid plays on Tony and Shepard. We'll see what that does to ownership. I think the really interesting part on today's slate is going to be Devonte Booker and Daryl Williams, the running backs at that upper price range with really stud, solid price tags on the Giants receivers that people are going to go to. People are going to jump up to the 10K range of the quarterbacks and Tyreek and Kelsey. I think those running backs become low owned. I think they become leverage plays. This is just what I'm assuming we will see later on today where you'll join the live stream. Yes, you will. So before we get out of here, let's build a SuperDraft lineup or parts of a SuperDraft lineup. SuperDraft, the multiplier format. It is where you should put your first $20 today, $30,000 contest today. So this is a contest that won't fill because I'm like the main promoter of SuperDraft. So if you get in on here, you're basically playing with a lot of people who follow me, but the contest will probably fill around, let's just say 75% tonight. And if that's the case, you beat 25% of the field just by entering a lineup. And we'll start to build the lineup right now, just by entering a lineup. That will not happen on DraftKings or FanDuel because all their contests fill because they have billion-dollar marketing budgets. And yes, billion with a B, not million. So let's put Daryl Williams as my highest projected SuperDraft play in this slate by 5 points. He looks like a fucking smash play. His multiplier is if he's like a backup running back. Same thing for Devonte Booker, by the way, and that's why you'll see Devonte Booker in this lineup. They're giving the multipliers to Devonte Booker and Daryl Williams as if they're backups. The same multipliers that Daryl Williams and Devonte Booker have today of 2.2x, meaning that you multiply their fantasy points. That's the format on SuperDraft, not salary cap multiplier. So Daryl Williams is 2.2x. When you put him in the captain, you get double that for the champion. But Daryl Williams is 2.2x, and so is Booker. That is the same exact multiplier that guys like Evan Ingram have, but very similar to the multipliers of Jerick McKinnon, Kyle Rudolph today, right? So smash those guys. Kadarius Toney is my second highest projected player in SuperDraft. Full projections on Patreon, by the way. And then there's 2 spots left. We'll let you fill in the last spot, but Daniel Jones, a 1.4x multiplier. That looks good. Some other solid options for you on this slate. Sterling Shepard, Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey, McCole Hardman. That's where I would go on SuperDraft. I think this is a pretty solid shell to start with. Again, if you want to use the code SAL, you put in $25, you get a free $25 to play with, which that contest is only $20 to get in. And they have a bunch of other contests, a bunch of different sports. That is where your first dollar should be going. We had a couple of members sign up for SuperDraft this past weekend, win $2,100, win $2,700, right? Win $1,400 on the Showdown slate on Thursday night just from starting out with a free $25. Why don't you do that too? Why don't you do that too? Take advantage of the knowledge that you have right now that these contests are not failing while that's the case. Take advantage that you stumbled upon this video and you know that. Appreciate you. $25 for free if you use the code SAL. I will see all you beautiful people later today on the live stream. I hope you enjoy your day. I'll see you in the Patreon. If you're not a Discord member, if you're not a Patreon member, to get into the Discord, do that down below. Take care of yourself. Enjoy the start to not only the day, not only the new week, but the new month. 3 news right there. Pop the collar. Pop the collars as we close out the show today and enjoy the rest of your Monday, the best day of the week. I'll see you when I see you. See you at 6 p.m. Eastern Time live.